Hello, hello to my True Blue crew. So good to see everybody bright and early this morning. My schedule gets really crazy sometimes, and with some work that I have scheduled and some other things going on in the evening, I couldn't make my regular Wednesday live sewing time. So I decided to just get the day started with some creativity. And that's why I am here first thing in the morning. So I hope that whatever time you catch this live stream, that you are enjoying your day and making progress on all of your quilting fun. So the intention and the cover image for the video showed you these pretty blue and brown blocks that I have been working on at my monthly sewing group. And I was ready for to rotate my projects, and I thought it would be fabulous to continue working on this quilt with these fun blocks that I have put together over the spring and summer. But I did not have time to do my prep. And this is the pattern. So you need to pay attention to each row and really get it laid out on a design wall and labeled and everything. And I did not take the time to do that last night, and I didn't have enough time this morning. And I don't want this live stream to be just me fiddling with placement of blocks and double checking the pattern every 10 seconds. So I will come back to this lovely pattern in a future video when I have time to get organized. But I am so happy to see everyone. As always, drop your name and your where you're tuning in from. I love this worldwide quilting community, and it's so fun to see where we all are tuning in from. So please make this interactive. Drop your comments in the chat. And I love to hear about your quilting projects. So since I am not making progress on my dry brush quilt, that will come at a later time, I am back to my Woven Hearts quilt along. And you have seen me work on this for the past couple weeks. It's a quilt along with Fat Quarter Shop, and we are making this block. It's called Woven Star, and for this particular layout, I've emphasized the star. So I've kept all of these small sections the same color, and I've got the red and the peach as the big pinwheel. I kind of describe this block as having a big pinwheel and a little star point, and I kept all those star points purple. But this morning I'm just going to do some scrappy stuff. So I've got my foundation papers from Fat Quarter Shop, and I'm just going to get started on my paper piecing, and we will have a lovely morning. Just, cranking out blocks on those unfinished objects. This is WIP Wednesday, and this is definitely my primary work in progress. The overall quilt, we've got the different stars, and we're just going to lay them out in a big heart pattern. And I've put together all the rows that have just a few blocks, because I am definitely a get to the end quickly type sewer. So I couldn't wait to have all the blocks together before I started laying out my rows. So I just got a few blocks done and put those beginning and ending rows, the very top of the heart and the very bottom when there's not a lot of blocks, just so that I could feel like I was making progress. And so now we're in the slog of the middle where I need 11 blocks per row. There's 3 rows that each need 11 blocks. And when you are paper piecing these blocks, I mean, it's not terrible to put together, but it does take time. And so what I'm doing for my first step is gluing my first piece of fabric onto the pattern to get my block started. So we've got our foundation and I've got my fabric here. So I'm just looking at where my numbers are and then holding it up so that I can make sure that I have a seam allowance around that whole area that I'm going to want that background fabric to show up. So what is your optimum time of day to be sewing? I try to, because I still am working full time, so a lot of my quilting time is on the weekends, obviously, and evenings. But it is always fun to start the day with a little bit of creation. I've heard some other quilters that are trying to be more mindful with their time, and they say create before you consume, because I tend to enjoy my coffee and scroll through my phone, which is just rather mindless. It's not not a great way to spend all of your time. So second step, let me angle this down a bit so you can see my work area. I need to fold the paper and add the next piece of fabric. So I fold my pattern back. I use my add a quarter ruler to make sure that I have an exact 1/4 inch seam, and then I place my next fabric. And I have made enough of these blocks now that I know where to place that fabric, and I just line it up with the cut edge that I just made, and then I can set that aside and be ready to sew. So this gets to be a pretty quick assembly line process when you are making the same block over and over. And here we are in the middle of November. So it is a good time for gratitude exercises. I am so thankful for all of my True Blue crew, everyone that joins me on these live streams. Hello, hello. It's so good to see you here in the middle of the week. We're just, I am also very thankful for the technology that lets us connect across all the miles. That I have so many friends who are, that I've met on message boards or in the chat while other live streams are going on. And it's so fun. And of course, then I need to start saving my pennies so that I can meet up with these people that are across the country. I'm thinking that Road to Virginia, a quilt show, obviously in Virginia, Roanoke, maybe. I don't know where exactly they're going. But that would be a fun East Coast show to meet up with everybody. And I'm super excited that QuiltCon is here in Phoenix next year. That is my backyard, so I will definitely be looking forward to seeing everyone in February. So please, if you are planning to come to QuiltCon, let me know, and I will stake out a table in the convention center lobby, and we can all meet and greet between classes and viewing the show and attending lectures and all the fun stuff that is going on. So I cut my fabric and I just piled it up with all the different prints that I am using. And so when I make these blocks, I just grab the next fabric in my stack. And since the strips were folded in half when I cut them, I take the second one and I put it in another pile, and I'll use that in the next round so that I'm getting some variety in my blocks. And I just grabbed 2 papers. Like I said, I need the dopamine hit, that I need to see my progress. So I could, I said the next row needs 11 blocks. I could take 11 papers and, but there's 4 quadrants. So that's 44 triangles that I would have to, prep. And so one step at a time. And I want to see my progress a little faster. And it's so funny because the star is almost like the star I have on my t-shirt. I love these shirts from Maker Valley. They do great work so that I can wear my passion. So let me know what you guys do for your sewing process. Do you do everything for one step, or do you make one block at a time? If it's a big quilt with just a few blocks, then yes, I will do, all step 1 for the 12 blocks and then move on. But when you have 70 blocks in your quilt, it tends to go, I change my process. So paper piecing, I'm going to shorten my stitch length. And then I can look at the paper side of my foundation pattern and just stitch along the line. And why aren't we? Something there. Okay, here is the last piece of my first set. So I run a leader ender through, and then I can start the process over to fold the pattern, fold the paper, trim the fabric, add the next piece of fabric, and sew. And I always use a nice little postcard, and I've got the steps for paper piecing printed on this. So if you want a handy tool for doing the folding, and because handy tool for folding the paper, and then it's got your reminder. So if you've never tried paper piecing and you think that would come in handy, I just grab the postcard, I line it up on my foundation paper, and that gives me an edge to press and to hold the out of quarter ruler. And I didn't get that little corner of the fabric trimmed. And I made the decision over the weekend. I've got all of these fun little scraps when I trim the papers for this project. And I was keeping them because, I mean, seriously, how adorable are those little snippets of fabric? And then I just said, no, I can't. I can't do a project with 1x2 rectangles. That's just too much. So they went into the bag to donate to the fabric recycling plant. Okay, the other thing I remember to do after step 1 is I lift up that first piece of fabric where I put the glue, and that way I won't iron that glue and, you know, double secure it once I lift it up from the fabric. It makes it, you know, there's less gunk there on the back of my blocks, and there won't be any nasty surprises later. I do like to pick and choose my fabrics when I am pairing them up for this next step. The next one in my pile was this peach, but I already had that. I didn't want peach with peach. You know, we make up all sorts of silly rules when we're trying to do things randomly. And it may make things look too much the same when I finish the blocks, but it's working for now. Whoops, and I did all that talking about lifting up the fabric from the paper, kind of rubbing off that glue residue. That's the thing I love about paper piecing, is that you can do so much of it without pins. So this whole triangle that I'm working on, once I do that first step with glue, I don't need to pin anything. Of course, when I get to the step where I am putting the triangles together, I do pin those longer seams. Make sure it's all my star points are held together correctly. And I just finger press as I'm going along here to keep my blocks flat. And then I will give it a press at the very end before I trim them all. That's the nice thing about this pattern, these foundation papers. They give you a nice, generous seam allowance. So I have not had a problem with any of my blocks losing points at the end. Remember to lift up that paper and get rid of the glue. So we've started making our plans for Thanksgiving. It's really nice because I live just 30 minutes away from both sides of the family. So we have our little routine of seeing people throughout the holiday weekend. And I am going to, my mom does the big turkey. So I don't have to worry about that prep. But I am bringing a green side dish. So we'll see what green vegetable I can find in a couple weeks to make for Thanksgiving, whether that is green beans or Brussels sprouts or something like that. My daughter loves sauteed Brussels sprouts, so that's what I'm leaning towards. And I've seen some really good recipes online where you sprinkle them with Parmesan and olive oil. Yum, yum. So that would be roasted Brussels sprouts, not sauteed. And actually, we're talking about a veggie bake for dinner one night this week. So sounds good. Summer fruits and fall vegetables. Love those fresh foods. Okay, we're into the sound effects portion of the process where there's not much talking, there's just sewing. And then we're ready to trim again. So I've got my star points done. Now I am just trimming and adding the background fabric. I just add my white. I'm using grunge white. That makes a really nice, subtle textured background for all of these colorful stars. And I am not doing any holiday sewing this year. Actually, I rarely do. I think the last time I did any holiday sewing, I made a simple little drawstring bag for my mom and gave it to her with some sock yarn so that she had a place to store a knitting project. Some ladies at work asked if I could come up with a craft project for them for just as like a fun holiday thing. I think I will dig into my holiday fabric stash and cut some charm squares, and we can make the simple folded coasters. I've done that before on a live stream where you just kind of weave the 4 fabrics around, and then all you have to do is sew around the edge, and you can turn it inside out and make a pretty scrappy little coaster. And mug rugs are always fun little projects. These 6-inch finished stars would be perfect as a little mug rug project if you wanted to have a little bit of patchwork around the house in different holiday themes. Good morning, Mary. I am working on the Woven Hearts quilt along. So I need about 30 more of these stars to finish the quilt top. It's been a fun paper-pieced project. It just gets a little bit boring for the videos because I'm just working with the same fabrics, the same technique week after week, but that's kind of how quilt-alongs go. If you don't get a lot of it done at the beginning, you're just kind of doing more of the same. But like I said, I really, really love paper piecing, and this fabric collection has been beautiful to work with. What do you find as the difficulty with paper piecing? I've heard some people say that I can understand not liking it. There tends to be a little more waste of fabric because you need oversized pieces to cover all the space. And depending on the pattern, it can be tricky to get the placement of the fabric right because you're flipping it and the angles can be kind of strange. This pattern is very straightforward and uh, easy to follow with simple shapes and simple placement of all the fabrics. So it's been a fun one to work on. Get all my buttons working for me. And even with complicated paper piecing blocks, I say that it is a beginner friendly technique because you are only sewing very short, straight seams for most patterns. I'm anxious to try a legit kits pattern. So that's on my bucket list. I have, a few really stunning patterns out there that I want to make someday. Some days, hopefully, I have decades left, as I tried to tell my daughter when she wants to go through and toss some of my fabric scraps. No, I'm not ready to give those bits up yet because I have many years of quilting left. I have time to use it. And I have a Friday night sew-in at my local quilt shop this week. So I plan on getting tons more of these stars done during that evening. And next week is the final week of the quilt along. So I am really pushing to have the quilt top done. I had hoped to get it all quilted, but with my life these days, finishing a quilt in 6 weeks in the middle of all my other responsibilities is just not realistic. Okay, so we are at another fold and trim step. So I finger press the fabric that I just added, and then I turn my triangle around to add the last piece of background fabric. Okay. Make sure I've got the one issue that I have with my background fabric, the Moda Grunge, is it's very hard to tell right side from wrong side. So, and I need to sit down and do this so that you're not just staring at my torso. I prefer cutting when I'm standing, but we'll make do. Yeah, the sew-ins, it had been named Pajama Mamas. They keep the shop open till 11 p.m. one night a month, and we all come and bring snacks. It's kind of like a pre-sleepover, popcorn and cookies, and lots of good conversation. And there's some members of a local guild that use that as their charity sewing night, and they all get together and work on charity projects. And yeah, it's a fun get together, and it really lets me get projects finished. They don't languish in the pile because I have a dedicated time to work on it and make a lot of progress. So I am going to get cranking here with these last couple dozen star blocks, and then I can move on to other things. Isn't that always the problem? So many quilts, so little time. And the other funny saying, I shop faster than I sew. That's definitely true. I inherited some kits from a quilter who passed away, and yeah, it's like they're all so gorgeous, but I just need to, that needs to be my free time activity, is sewing. Because as I heard recently, I would much rather pass on finished quilts to my family than leave behind piles of fabric. So that is my motivating goal. I'm really envious of the people that don't have a stash. They buy what they need for one project, finish that project, and then move on to purchasing the next. And I started accumulating right from the start, before I ever knew what I wanted to do next. Just collect all the pretty things. Oh, complete attention on the paper piecing. Yeah, to get things lined up. Like I said, this is, I've done a lot of paper piecing projects, so the process is deeply embedded. And as I said, these blocks are pretty simple. I set aside the project that was going to require a lot of concentration. I have, for those of you that didn't catch the very beginning, I had anticipated working with these pretty blue and brown blocks. I have all the blocks completed. Let me grab the picture for this quilt. But as you can see, it's going to take a lot of concentration to lay out those rows. And I didn't do the prep ahead of time. I had all these wonderful good intentions of laying everything out on my design wall last night so that I had all the rows prepped and could just sit and sew and chat with you this morning. And that didn't happen. I got suckered into a mystery novel, and I was very close to the end, so I just spent all my time reading, and now that book is done, it can go back to the library, and I can concentrate on my sewing. Yeah, Mary, I'm the same way, several quilts going at a time. I really, the quilt I'm working on is my favorite color combination generally. I love these peach and purple and red tones that I'm using in these stars, but obviously True Blue quilts. Blues are always my go-to fabric combination. So when I saw those blues and browns, and I tend to go for the borderline masculine color schemes for my bedroom. So my husband was very happy when we met that I was not one of these pink ruffly bedspread type gals. Okay, I'm going to get these last little seams done on these 8 sections that will make my 2 stars for today. I may sneak back in here at lunch and get another one done. Like I have been saying, that having that deadline next week is really, really pushing me, but I'm unfortunately a procrastinator. If it weren't for the last minute, nothing would ever get done. And so I need those deadlines to push me to a finish. And I always do the math over and over again. It's like, oh, I have 6 weeks to get this done. That's 20 blocks a week. Oh, and and I do maybe 4. And then, oh, I have 60 blocks left. So now I need to do, 6 blocks a day. And I just continually do the math and divide. And now it's like, oh my gosh, I need to get 30 blocks done in 2 days. But again, this is not life and death. No one is going to be harmed if this quilt takes a little bit longer to get finished. I'm just excited to move on to the next project that I have in mind. I'm going to have some fun tutorials coming up in December. So if you have not subscribed to True Blue Quilts, do that now. Hit that subscribe button. I appreciate it. Oh, Mary, I'm so glad that you're able to decorate your husband's space in the nursing home with fishing and hunting. I bet. And I'm sure other residents like to see that as well. Always fun to put some personality into those hospital environments. So here is the woven hearts quilt along pattern. You can get it from Fat Quarter Shop. I think the pattern, the promo may be over, but you may still be able to get a kit from Fat Quarter Shop. Just search Woven Hearts. I didn't put the link in today's description, but you can go to one of my other Woven Hearts videos and find the link to the pattern. The foundation papers are wonderful. The add a quarter ruler is a great tool. And I'm watching the clock because I do have to go back to work this morning. I have a work from home job. So my commute, I just have to run downstairs and log back in to the computer. But we are ready to put some stars together. So I'm going to trim these, and then, like I said, I prefer to be standing for cutting. And I am separating the little bit of paper from the fabric because those go to different recycling buckets. Remember to sort paper and fabric. Okay. So now I can take my fabric scraps and add those to the bucket of trimmings, and we'll deliver those. And now I'm doing here. I cheated a little bit by planning. These aren't completely random, but I'm going to put those two fabrics together, or those two triangles, and I have to be very careful to remember which seam I want to sew on, because if I rotate these triangles and sew the wrong seam, I won't end up with the fabric arrangement that I had initially planned. And there are registration marks on the foundations of where to line up your star points. So I simply put a single pin on the seam that I want to sew. And then here's my next combination. So we'll get that lined up. I'm making sure all my fabrics are aligned, because it's very hard to ease things in when there's paper attached. So you have to get everything lined up from the beginning. Okay, and then what does my next block look like? Kind of squint to get the effect. Okay, that'll be good. I've got that fabric combination, and I'm going to sew on this side. That lined up. And I have two types of pins that I work with. I mean, there's tons of pins out there, right? And I always put on my supply list when I teach a beginner quilting class, I ask them to look for the Clover glass head silk pins, because those I have found are nice and sharp and thin for quilters. And so those are, you can barely see them there. They have yellow and blue tops, and these are the short ones. But I also have, they make some that are longer that have green and orange tips, and they are maybe 1.5 inches. So I use those longer ones for these paper layers. Okay, this is going to go fast now that we have just 4 seams to finish up for our stars. Make sure everything is aligned when I start. I sewed right over those pins. So you have to remember to take those out here for a minute and look at my star points. And now I am just ripping off that little bit of paper that was in the seam so that I can press that seam open and move on to my next step. And for some reason, that paper didn't want to rip off smoothly this morning. So the seams do go in different ways because I pressed everything to one side as I was building the triangle, but then the center seams I always press open. It just reduces the bulk there when you are joining all these pieces together at the center of the star. So taking the paper off is the tedious part of this. Of this project. Oh, and no, I did get all paper. How odd. Okay. Yes. There is that, and I got that orange fabric to match up, so not completely scrappy. And then for this step, I match up that center seam and then put my pin at a diagonal so that it crosses both fabrics that are pressed open. Good morning, Michelle. Woke up to a chilly morning in New York. I'm sure your definition of chilly is much different than mine. We don't have frost on the ground, but when it dips below 50, I definitely feel the chill here in Arizona. And yes, Jay, I feel the same way. The day job supports my quilting obsession. And I will get back to that in just a few minutes. I'm going to sew 2 more seams and then go back to work. And I'm not very excited today because I've got a full day of training to sit through. I'm on a support team. And so we audit the training classes. And so this is about the 4th time I've gone through this particular training, and it definitely gets old. Okay, so I press my seams open after I remove the paper from that one little section of seam allowance so it doesn't get sewn down and become really hard to dig out later. And I just save all the blocks that still have the paper attached, and I keep them with me on the couch when I am watching TV on the weekends, and I just rip all the papers off in one big session. Okay, so I match up the middle first as best I can, and then I use the registration marks on the pattern to get the rest of the block lined up. And I said that at the beginning, I enjoy paper piecing because there's not as much pinning, because I do that first step with glue. And so the whole first part of my paper piecing project, I don't use any pins at all. And then as I finish the block, I pin all the intersections. Make sure that seam lays flat. Okay, and here is our last seam for today. Look at that, right at the 8 o'clock hour. Run my leader ender through, and then get pins put away. Ta-da! Ta-da! Okay, so we have 2 more stars to add to the Woven Hearts quilt. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you are making wonderful progress on your quilts, and we will be back soon. Take care.